not going to touch that second part, man. Being the senior master, I want to stay senior master. But you ask a very good question, and basically it is, with the great dramatic rise of American Catholicism in the 19th century and first part of the 20th century, what has happened? What's happening today to the energy, the secularism that seems to be everywhere? What's happened to that spirit of Catholicism that seems to be so attenuated now that you can barely sense it?
By political correctness.
By political correctness.
Well, I'm going to give a rather more optimistic response to that, because while I can recognize that there are a lot of disconcerting influences out there, I seem to encounter a lot of young priests who are sound as a bell, who are willing to roll up their sleeves and make a great difference. I think that there's a lot of energy and a lot of commitment and a lot of fight in the parishes that I see in New York City, not just in Father Rutler's church, but in many others. So I think that there's a younger generation coming up that is sounder than perhaps that generation that misinterpreted Vatican II. So, and I think that certain of these secular influences, such as they are good for us, because they good for the church, because they put us on our mettle. We need to be tested to a certain extent, and I think that we're up to that challenge. So I would, at the risk of sounding Pollyannish, I'm more optimistic about that.
So way back. Thank you. On that note, I'd like to add, when we look at the church in the 21st century, and my observations and my studies, I see the whole, and Holy Father in Rome talks about the new dark age of moral relativism. And you're asking about where is the young lady, or where is the church going? I think we're being constrained when we address moral relativism in the public square. We are being told that it is becoming politically incorrect. And I think that is a suppression on the church, because I think we're in a unique venue to be able to address this issue if we get into adult, post-confirmation adult activity programs at the diocese. Dr. Krepp, yesterday, one of the books that I'm familiar with is a tremendous healing, and the gentleman here addressed it.
Well, excuse me, sir, but what would the question be?
The question is how, basically, going to the young lady's question, how can we as a church move forward, taking the history of the Catholic Church?
All right, how are we to move forward in the 21st century, taking the history of the Catholic Church in America?
Well, again, this is not a question I'm afraid that I'm qualified to have any worthwhile insights into. I think that talk on the grammar of dissent yesterday was very good. And at one point, I think Professor Griffith said that we must fast and pray. I think to a certain extent that's always good advice. The church is always there for us. It's reality. So I wouldn't be discouraged by these things. I think that we've always a fight on our hands. We have the wherewithal to fight that fight. So let's just get on with it. That's what would be my response. Charles.
Cliff, to the young lady's previous question, I would like to take the second half of the question. I know that you don't wish to because you are a member of the faculty. I am a board member and alum and a father of children boys now attending this school, and I would like to answer it. There are major secular influences on my children, but what I have found in this institution is that there is growth, spiritual growth. There is momentum. We are dealing with the vocations of the monastery of the Lord. And I would simply like to say that I share your concern, but Mr. Short, I share your optimism.
I graduated from Portsmouth in '65. I have a contrary view to some of this. I like the quotation from Newman about how the educated laity, at least in the 19th century, felt was a dichotomy between Christians and poor, and the educated laity would be ignored. I think it would be a disaster for this country if anything like the elimination and separation of church and state had ever occurred. Right now, we have 6 Catholics in the U.S. Supreme Court. We're shortly going to have 3 Jews and not 1 Protestant in an overwhelmingly Protestant country. The Portsmouth experience that I had was humanist and enlightenment oriented. And this business about telling Obama that he shouldn't go to Notre Dame, Raymond Burke, the fellow from the Vatican who did it, was the Archbishop of St. Louis, was removed after he excommunicated a Pope's priest. Our church has now been somewhat taken over by fundamentalists. And the Protestant sects, after the
Excuse me, sir, could I have a question?
Yeah, the question is, do you recognize this difference of opinion by what I would call more enlightened humanist Catholics who frankly reject all of this business that somehow this country is oppressing Catholics, or that somehow it would be good to get rid of the separation of church and state?
All right. Do you feel that an enlightened American Catholicism that is for the separation of church and state, etc., or a more fundamentalist Roman Catholicism, which seems to be in the wings now, which do you see as, what would you favor?
Thanks for that question. Look, I think that we're at cross purposes here. Perhaps I expressed myself poorly in that hastily written talk of mine. The only point that I meant to make vis-a-vis President Hussein Obama and the Notre Dame speech, this has nothing whatever to do with church and state. This has to do with Notre Dame honoring someone who is directly opposed to the protection of the unborn. So I don't see how that relates to church and state. So that's that.
I tell you what, it is now just about 10:30. I am sure that Mr. Short would be happy to entertain any questions out in the foyer while we all get some refreshment for our next talk. Thank you, Mr. Short.